after the gig. Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. I am spinning this compilation that comes with patronage of the highest tier to the High Defamation podcast run by none other than Eric Bauer. I've gotten two of these. This is for the Disclose episode. This is for the Finish episode. It's really well done mixes. This one has kicks off with Discharge as it should. But after the gig from the Realities of War 7-inch, now we got Gizm playing. You also got Deathside, Totalitar, Mass Control, Final Warning, MG15, Bacteria, Wolfpack, Broken Bones, Gates, Crucified by the System, and of course Disclose. Goat Worshiper and Black Goat as well. So I can't recommend the podcast enough. If you have the extra scratch and want to get some cool mixes in the mail, I recommend that too. So, somewhat contrasting with the deep dive that I've been on for the past couple of months, around the turn of the year, I've been getting really into the early, for lack of a better term, brutal death metal stuff. I always thought that was a, redundant kind of term. What death metal isn't brutal, but the stuff that's more heavy on the slammy parts. I hate the term slam too, but the kind of the mosh parts, extreme tempo shifts, kind of deeper, more guttural vocals, all the stuff leading into what became the slam genre, all that kind of shit that was heavily influenced by Cannibal Corpse and Suffocation. It's been talked about that maybe this will be the new retro thing that people get nostalgic about and kind of add a modern spin to. I think, the whole reason that I've been going down this hole is I got into the Heavy Hole podcast run by Will from Artificial Brain and Buckshot Facelift and many others from Long Island, where they talk about all these classic bands. And I have a lot of holes in my collection and my listening diet as far as this stuff goes. I love those Internal Bleeding demos and Suffocation. I just got into Pyrexia. Like, a lot of this stuff was unexplored territory to me for one reason or another. I used to see bands like Deeds of Flesh and early Dying Fetus shows and stuff all the time when I was a kid, but it was more of just like a live experience. I was like a crust punk kind of dude that was into grind and crust, and I appreciated that stuff live, but I never bought the albums. So anyway, this is kind of somewhat unexplored territory for me other than the heavy hitters, and I've gone off the deep end. I'm mostly looking for stuff that's like raw in recording quality, the beginning of certain regional scenes, really heavy, obscure stuff, and Yonkers and Long Island and bands like, areas like that. So I've been kind of deep diving on all that shit. So I have a stack of stuff here that's directly related to that, and some stuff that's kind of on the fringes, or just kind of, to use a very hot vocabulary word for one reason or another these days, adjacent to it. There's some more stuff that's leaning towards like Goregrind, or I'm looking at the top here, even like an example of early slam. But at the top, I put this at the top because I have a correction. Embarrassingly enough, the intro song over our buddy Tom Hanks there of the last update was this band, Disgorged. That's Disgorged in the past tense there, from Rochester, New York. They became Withered Earth. There's some stuff from the very early Withered Earth recording on here, first Withered Earth demo rather, and I believe I put Engorged, which is not the same band at all. Great band, sort of adjacent in sound, not the same band, from the Pacific Northwest. Love Engorged, love that self-titled, one of my favorite records from when it came out. But this is Disgorged. This is the band that was over the top of the intro last update. Great raw, like cement mixer, not all too different than early Suffocation, heavy on the really heavy slamming slow parts, brutal fucking breakdowns, lots of blasts, fucking really good. It's got this just disgustingly noisy raw recording that I love with this stuff. Withered Earth gets a little bit more technical, maybe slightly on the progressive tip a little bit. Definitely good 90s death metal, but Disgorge was brutal as fuck. They had the drummer Dave Colross, who looks like a journeyman drummer. He's been in every notable death metal band almost, like Malevolent Creation, played live in Incantation, I think, Suffocation, a lot of the Asians he's been in. Immolation maybe too, not sure about that one, but I was reading about them, and the dude's done a lot of stuff. So this came out in Severed a while ago, but these demos are from the early 90s, and certainly ahead of the pack as far as stuff that's that sledgehammering heavy. Next up is something that I've wanted to get my hands on for a while. This is the Dripping full length. I got a compilation on Necroharmonic a year or two ago that had all the demos. This is the only full length, to my knowledge, came out from these Jersey guys. Disintegration of thought patterns during synthetic mind-traveling bliss. This probably comes closest to what I'd call slam out of anything that I own. The real cartoonish, like, quote-unquote slam stuff isn't my thing, at least yet. Who knows, in a year or two, maybe I'll be all about it. You'll see me in a fitted baseball cap or whatever. But this is real weird. I mean, it's got those really pummeling heavy mosh parts, but there's bass drops, there's really, like, odd psychedelic bits, there's very, like, kind of, like, spacey, noisy, sci-fi kind of textures all over it, which I really like. Very fucking cool band. I heard these guys on a podcast. I think I heard them on Illogical Contraption a couple of years ago, and I was like, that is fucking out there stuff, but, like, in a really cool way. Yonkers is one of those scenes where I'm like, ooh, I know Mortician's from there. I need to hear more shit. And also on that Heavy Hole podcast, I talk a lot about these guys. I interview them on a couple of different episodes, and I knew the name, but I never really took the plunge. Till now, this is a re-recording and reissue of the debut Malignancy record, Intrauterine Cannibalism. To be honest, TBH, I haven't listened to the re-recorded version yet. I listen to most of my CDs via streaming. I put everything up on a Dropbox, and I have a little player on my phone. Works out really nice. But sometimes it doesn't read things, and they don't load, and it's weird. I labeled the re-recorded version, and it just wouldn't show up. So I haven't had a chance to actually spin it. The classic original version is fucking awesome. Fast, brutal death metal, obviously. But their slow parts are a lot more imaginative. They're not just doing that, like, Suffo climb kind of riff that a lot of bands seem to like to use. There's a lot more kind of imaginative, like, slower parts or breakdowns. The fast parts, the blasts have seemingly a lot going on in the background. They're very, I don't know, maybe kind of Flo Mornier, that's the guy, right, from Cryptopsy, inspired kind of drumming going on. It's very busy but really good. Very fucking talented band. There's a lot technically going on with the riffs and everything, but everything's so, like, low register that you might miss it. It's kind of deceptively technical. Very guttural, almost burpy vocals, which I admit were kind of an acquired taste for me for quite a while, but I'm totally all in on that kind of shit right now. Very fucking cool. Intrauterine Cannibalism. Reissued by Severed a while ago, I think mid-2000s, if I'm not mistaken. I'll correct it if I am. The original came out in the late 90s sometime. Another Severed release, re-release. Entity, E-N-T-E-T-Y. Exhumed Sarcophagus, 90 to 94. This has at least one member that went on to be in Coffin Texts and is now in Possessed, which is really interesting. Weird thing about this release is it has a not so well recorded live set first before the demo tracks, so I just kind of fast forwarded past those. I mean, I've heard worse, but why is it first on there? I don't know. So it's got the Cadaveric Necrogrind session from 93 remix, and the Into the Desolate session tape version from 94. This is very early. I wouldn't say direct Carcass worship, but there's certainly a strong influence. Real gurgly, low register kind of Goregrind stuff, mostly fast. California band, not sure where in California they were from, but obviously went on to do some pretty great stuff. Next up, kind of outside of that whole thing, but definitely played with a lot of bands like this, and I know Charlie especially distroed a lot of stuff like this and still does. This is Psycho. Boston band, cult Boston band that's been around since the early 80s, were the backing band for G.G. Allin at one point. Ran the gamut from when they started as almost like a straightforward, snotty Ramonesy band to like a death grind band. They've done it all. They've seen it all. This is the Grind Years, which compiles all their grind stuff, including one of my favorite 7-inches, the split with the Agathocles. There's a track on there. I suck with song names these days because the old synapses are rotting. But there's a track from, I believe, the split with the Agathocles where they break into a Cream riff. I think it's Sunshine of Your Love. I can't remember, but they break into like a stolen riff from a Cream song, and it's fucking awesome. They have some sort of effect on the vocals on that recording and maybe a few others that like just make it sound completely fucking demented, and it's fucking rad. So this came out on Self-Made God, 2010, something like that. Yeah, 2010. Hey, I remembered something. Sweet. But yeah, Psycho, the Grind Ears, still going. Psycho, still playing. Great band live. I recommend if they're in your area. I don't see them playing outside of New England so much, but if you have a chance, if you're around here, or if they venture out, like I think they play New York sometimes, you get a chance to see them, do it. They're fucking awesome. Next up, another demos compilation. Just picked this up, Jersey band called Mortal Decay, Gathering of Human Artifacts. This is a compilation of demos. Just got this the other day, so I've only spun it like once. Sounds to me, it's got very froggy, burpy, like Demolich kind of vocals going on, but the music is a like real, mostly slower, heavier. There's some fast parts thrown in there, but it's got a real creepy, just sort of like cryptic vibe to it. Real like lurking in the graveyard, kind of ghoulish kind of shit going on, but with like very, very guttural kind of vocals. Got sort of slammy elements as well. I don't think I got all the way to the end, so I don't know if their sound changed up. I know after this they did a full length that was more like kind of porno inspired. I saw the cover and I saw the song titles and I was like, nah, I'm not really. That sort of thing doesn't really do anything for me. But this stuff is fucking great. Another classic, Embalmer. So this is a discography up to a point. They had a full length that came out mid-2000s, I think, on Hell's Headbangers. This is everything up to that. Collection of Carnage by Embalmer from Ohio. I fucking love this band because they have some very, very, like, as brutal as it gets elements with blast beats, and a lot of speed and a lot of heaviness, but there's also a certain, like, classic US death metal, creepy kind of vibe as well that kind of brings to mind early Necrophagia and Impetigo. Their slow parts remind me of that, like, kind of real, like, meat and potatoes, basic, like, creepy US death metal stuff, but interspersed with, like, a lot of, like, blasting brutality. And the blasting, too, is, like, really unique. I don't know, I'm not a drummer, but I'm fascinated by how people play. For instance, I was watching the Cannibal Corpse documentary for the 800th time, and they were talking about how Mazurkowitz does double bass under his blast and uses his right hand, and I guess one-footed blasts, your hands are like, I don't know. I found it interesting because I'm a talentless hack, but it sounds like this guy's doing something a little bit different, like almost like he's using both toms or something. I'm not sure. The blasts sound like they're varying in tempo a little bit. It has a really, like, almost falling apart, like, manic sort of quality to it, and I really like that about their approach. This compiles all their demos, their comeback record from 2006, full length, and I also bought, just because I saw it and had to have it, this is included on it, the There Was Blood Everywhere EP. This is the 7-inch that came out on Relapse back in the day. I think it was 99 or 2000 when this came out. Yeah, I saw it on the shelf at Residency and just kind of had to have it, but looks like it was, earlier than I thought, 96 or 95. Fucking great record. Probably the best of their material so far, I think. That new one is no slouch, though, the one that came out a few years ago. Leaning more into, like, kind of Finnish stuff. This is a band from Finland. Festerday. I got this from Svart Records. They had a sale recently. Love Svart. For a little while, there was some kind of glitch with their shopping cart checkout thing where it wouldn't let me buy anything from them. It kept saying it didn't have my area code, and to enter area code, and I did, and it just, like, didn't register. So I guess they fixed whatever that was. They had a sale where this, and even with shipping from Finland, I think this ended up being like $6 or something. Ben Smashers talked about it. I wanted to get it. It's fucking great. The first disc is like all re-recorded stuff, and it's good. You know, that doesn't always turn out super well, but this, they kept it raw on it. You know, it's very gurgly, death grind kind of carcass sort of stuff. Not a total blast fest. You know, it's very finished in sound. It's got that gloomy kind of thin thing going on. And then disc 2 is all the original demos, a rehearsal, and live tracks. And I love the spot gloss on this. It's kind of weird how that auto, look how bright it is. I can see clearly now. Anyway, cool collage. You know, all in all, like a really nice package. And I mean, if you know Svart, they put out a ton of good stuff. And I'm really excited because they're reissuing the winter material on the discography. I already have the LP, but it's got the EP and the demo on there, and I need that in my life, and I've needed it for quite a while. So looking forward to supporting that label even more when that comes out. Anyway, tangent there. This is Buckshot Facelift, Ulcer Island. Long Island grind band, one of those kitchen sink kind of grind bands that mixes in quite a bit of different styles. Even from the get-go here, the title track, which is the first song, Ulcer Island, has these elements of like melodic Long Island hardcore, which is very strange, but it's very definitively sort of like Long Island hardcore sounding, like Mind Over Matter, but mixed with grind. It's very cool. Never heard anything like that. The rest of the record kind of jumps all over the place while keeping the center column of grind firmly in place. There's hardcore and, you know, death metal, even some like little black metal touches on it here and there. I like bands who do that when they can pull it off, and Buckshot Facelift can. As I mentioned, it's Will from Artificial Brain and the Heavy Hole Podcast's other band. I'm not sure if they're active right now. I think they're semi-active. But yeah, they have other stuff out too that I haven't heard, but that record's great. I think it's their latest. It's from like 2017, sorry, on Paragon Records. Up next, the split with Ruin and Anthropic. You know, the more I think about it, this new wave of like caveman, quote unquote, kind of basic raw meat and potatoes, kind of mortician-y sort of death metal bands that don't utilize like a lot of technical drumming, and they have like the basic riffing, and they're just going up for the heavy kind of thing. That appeals to me quite a deal, but it definitely has gotten pretty oversaturated. And if I had to pick one band that plays in that style, you know, out of some of the bands that have come out on 20 Buck Spin and Dark Descent, and not that those labels do that style like exclusively, but they do that stuff pretty well, curating that kind of sound. All those bands, Maggot Stomp bands and stuff, I'd have to say I'd probably like Ruin the best. Ruin just seems to be the catchiest. They seem to capture that really like fucking gross energy in the recording style and everything. They're a band that I've been trying to pick up everything I can by, and I think I have at this point. I have a compilation that I just got, and both full lengths, and then the split. I think that's everything. I like Ruin a lot. They're definitely my favorite, like, knuckle scraping fucking caveman, whatever overused term you want to use, death metal band of this style. And this is no slouch, the 4 songs on here. I do like it a lot, and as much as I love Ruin, as I've just kind of gushed about them, I like the Anthropic songs on here even more. Anthropic are a grind band from Buffalo, kind of a death metal leaning grind band. They really nailed like the Terrorizer, Sandoval, one-footed blast drum style on this. It's super fucking catchy. It's really good. They have another recording that's like a long EP or a short LP's length that's on Bandcamp, and it's not available on any physical format, which is a fucking bummer. I know one of these guys, or a couple of these guys, are veterans of the Buffalo scene. One of them helped book that Day of Death that happened in whatever that was, 90 or 91, with all those bands. Like every important death metal band at the time played it, and I know he was in an early Buffalo death metal band whose name escapes me as well. But this is like perfect, you know, not cloning Terrorizer, but they definitely captured that energy of the drum style really well. Just good, like grindy death metal kind of stuff. I need to check out that full length and maybe just buck up and pay for the MP3s on Bandcamp just because it's that good. I want to support that band. Next up is Dahmer. This is a studio discography. I've loved Dahmer for a long time. This was real cheap. It was only like $5 or something on Discogs, I think. I'm not sure when this came out, but it came out on Grind It Records. Grind It, exclamation point. French-Canadian band. They were like kind of grind, but they had certain like punky crust and power violence sort of elements. Lots of different vocal approaches, like low carcass growls, like infest guy, like shrieks. So it's cool. They keep things interesting that way. I have a ton of their 7 inches. Dahmerized, their full length, was a favorite of mine back in the day, and this slaps together everything I have. It's kind of funny because like when I was into them back in the day, you know, they were one of the heavier and more like death metal sounding bands that I liked. I was really into. The reason I missed out on all this stuff the first time around, I was super into DIY punk. I was into like grind of this stripe a little bit, a lot of the slap a hand power violence stuff, a lot of profane existence crust, you know. And this was definitely one of the heaviest things that I listened to. I had a few token metal bands that I still carried with me from when I was into metal in my early teens. I still loved Bolt Thrower and Creator and The Accused and stuff like that. But this Dahmer was one of the heaviest, and it's funny because like listening to them next to some of this stuff, they sound like fucking Black Flag or something, just because the vocals aren't growled all the way fucking through, and they have like a little variation in you know, the vocal department, and some of the they're not constantly blasting, and it's not, you know, tuned to F or whatever. Maybe it is, I don't know. Next up, we got Squash Bowels 7-inch Audio Terror on Mirdas Productions. So this is another 7-inch compilation, legendary Polish grind band, kind of leaning towards the gory stuff, but not really cloning Carcass or anything like that. Really short songs, real like scraping on the guitar strings, kind of abrasiveness to it that I really like. Not too much else to say than that. I mean, these guys are legends in their own right. Very, very short songs. I mean, there's like 39 tracks on this, compiling all their early 7-inch material. There's some live stuff, and it sounds pretty decent for a live grind band. But yeah, super important band. I knew I had to pick up something by them. I had this back in the day, you know, towards the end of my sort of listening habits of being really into crust and power violence and stuff. I did get more into some metal. I think Dahmer kind of helped push me down that path, but I got into like Disgorged and these guys. Birdflesh, Night of the Ultimate Mosh. I had this back in the day. I was like, oh, I need to purchase that again. This is their second record. Like Disgorged, it's like got, you know, a baseline of grindcore, but they have such good creative riffs on it that are like super busy and frantic, but not overbearing. Doing a lot of like, you know, there's obvious kind of nods to thrash metal on here. There's a lot of thrashy kind of riffs. Some even like Swedish, like D-beat and hardcore influences. Crazy kind of higher end, like kind of shrieky sort of vocals with I think some backing growls thrown in. But really fucking fun band. I forgot how fun these guys are. And they're opening for General Surgery in Worcester at the end of May, and I'm going. It's gonna be sick. I'm gonna go with Ben from Maine. I'm gonna rule. He's my boy. Grind friend for life. Next up is Disgorge Mexico. Chronic Corpora Infest. Hopefully I don't get in shit for even showing this off. I'm not even gonna flip it around on the back. Americane Productions. I don't know when this came out. Sometime in the 90s. Probably late 90s. Timeline-wise, I think that makes sense. But, you know, you hear things about, like, which Disgorge do you prefer? I need to pick up some Disgorge Cali stuff. This is, like, overwhelmingly gross sounding. Goregrind, again, but going off in kind of a different direction than, you know, just Carcass stuff. It's just, like, one pure stream of just disgusting filth the whole time. There's something about the recording. Ugh, it's just repulsive sounding, like in the best way I can express. That's really all I can really say about it. Deathrune. This is another Yonkers band. Those Who Choose the Fallen. This is a discography CD including a full unreleased record from full length from 1996. So these guys were on a comp with Mortician and Malignancy and a band called Alive. That's the only thing Alive did. And they were kind of I hear them talked about on that podcast a lot. They were kind of like a legendary Yonkers band. This compiles all the demos on the first CD and the unreleased full length on the other CD on Dark Blasphemies Records. So this band is fucking great. It's a shame and a pity and an eldritch horror that full length never got released, because it's just great fucking death metal. I wouldn't even say it's approaching what would be considered like quote unquote brutal death metal at the time. It has its chunky and heavy and kind of moshy elements, but it's also got that really sort of foreboding, creepy thing, not all too dissimilar to what Mortal Decay has. The vocals aren't froggy like that. Their demos are an interesting artifact at the time. The first couple are kind of a rough listen because you can tell the drummer's just getting his sea legs and just figuring out, how to play. He's keeping time okay, but it's a little bit like slow and sloppy. I certainly don't mind that. I like amateurish, almost kind of punk recordings and everything. But by the last demo, they're pulling it together and it sounds really good. And you can tell rhythmically he's just got, even though he's just learning on the first couple, he's just got that New York kind of thing. There's kind of standard metal kind of patterns, but there's a lot of like kind of just groove laden kind of just heavy bits that you just get from all kinds of bands down that way, whether they're hardcore or death metal or whatever. Going all the way across to Southern Europe, next we have the Agonia discography. This is an Italian band. Servants. This is just early 90s death metal, heavily influenced by Suffocation. They've even got the red logo, white artwork. It reminds me of the first couple of Internal Bleeding releases that were on Wild Rags. I realize that war metal bands probably, really own the real estate on that sort of aesthetic, but you see it a lot with bands like this too. It sounds a lot like Human Waste. It sounds a lot like those first couple Internal Bleeding demos. It's really good. It's really heavy, really fucking pummeling, punishing, early brutal death metal stuff. I know that one of the guys from this band went on to start a label that put out the earliest Dying Fetus stuff and some other noteworthy releases. The music is fucking great. There's just like a couple of demos and I think an EP on here, but it's certainly early Suffocation. You like Long Island death metal shit, this is up your alley for sure. Scattered Remnants too, can't forget about them. They're great. They're playing a reunion soon. I can't go. Maybe they already played it. I have no idea. Pessimist, Cult of the Initiated, Baltimore, Maryland band. This is a band I feel like they fall into the conversation with all this like sort of late 90s stuff, and people might think of them on the same terms as, say, a Dying Fetus, especially because they're from around the same area. They just, to me, sound more like just good, technically adept, straightforward death metal stuff. A bit of vocal variation between highs and lows. They'd probably appeal a lot to people into Suffocation as well as like fucking Morbid Angel. There's a good like heavy, straightforward kind of thing. The tempo shifts and the slow parts aren't gratuitous like crowd pandering mosh fodder or anything like that. There's a lot going on. Songs are around the 5-minute mark, so there's like a lot of like pretty complex instrumentation, but not masturbatory or anything. Fucking great death metal band. I picked up Pathos did like a odds and ends comp of demo songs and covers and stuff, and that's a lot of fun, so I wanted to check out a full album. This is on Lost Disciple. I believe it came out in 97. Deeds of Flesh is a band that I saw live a bunch of times, never owned anything by. A lot of kids who I hung out with in the late 90s, early 2000s loved them. I've heard this referred to as their best, Path of the Weakening. They're from California, I think. I know to a lot of people they're a super important band. I feel like they've kind of dropped out of the conversation with all this quote-unquote OSDM stuff. Bleh to the title, not to the bands, because I like a lot of that retread stuff. But this, to me, also is just really competently played, straightforward, mostly fast death metal. It's not bowling you over with technicality for technicality's sake. There's a certain sort of ambiance to it that's like pretty scary, but it's fucking relentless, like neck snapping, blast laden fucking death metal stuff, and it's fucking awesome. I used to own this. Decided I'd repurchase it because it was cheap. Kind of coming from like an adjacent place. Like I saw these guys at Hellfest, and when it was still in Syracuse, for example. Circle of Dead Children. This reminds me of like when a lot of hardcore kids and people outside of like underground metal were getting into and playing grind and death metal stuff. This came out on Death Vomit, but I know I'm pretty sure they were on Willow Tip later. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Stuff like Commit Suicide and oh god, there's a bunch more that I'm forgetting. A lot of the early Willow Tip kind of bands and everything. You've got basically like really, really precisely played, technical for grindcore, but you know, not like, we're not talking tech like Dillinger Escape Plan kind of stuff. But you can see how maybe that this is informed a little bit by all that stuff like Coalesce and Dillinger a bit, but it's still very firmly a grindcore release with like guttural vocals and everything. It's interesting. It's just all over the place enough to keep it from getting boring. You know, it's all very cohesive. I like this record a lot, you know, and it's aged well for me. Yeah, I kind of think of it in the same terms as like Fate of Icarus and like Commit Suicide and that whole kind of scene. Up next, Intestine Ballism. I guess these guys got more melodic death metal later. I'll have to explore that stuff. I'll take YouTubers' words for it that it's all very good. This does have like, this is the demo reissued with bonus tracks. This does have some touches of melody here and there. It's a Japanese band, so just like as far as influences go and approach and, you know, culture and everything, they're coming from a different place. That's why it's cool to listen to bands from across the world. But it is pretty brutal, you know. I think it would appeal to anybody who likes the stack of stuff that I've been babbling about. Pretty original sounding stuff, and bonus points for sure for having some live tracks at the end, 7 through 10, 4 live songs that sound just as good as a studio recording. They sound perfect. But yeah, pretty unique, pretty singular fucking death metal band that has both like brutal and melodic elements. Finally, Drawn and Quartered from Seattle. I thought they were from LA for some reason, but you know, I did my due diligence and did my research. I need to get a new case for this. I have them lying around, but Hail Infernal Darkness. I have their first album, To Kill Is Human, I think it's called. I like that a lot. That more seemed kind of in the realm of like Barnes era Cannibal Corpse more than anything else. It's kind of straightforward, kind of, you know, low end, growly, almost gurgly, gory kind of death metal stuff from what I remember. I like it a lot. This seems to be expanding more into like Morbid Angel, early Immolation, kind of demonic, you know, just a little bit dissonant, not a lot, you know, that kind of stuff. The last song on here, Night Ghoul of the Graveyards, is like almost like a straight up like nod to Swedish black metal. It almost sounds to me like they've been listening to a ton of like Dissection and Marduk and decided they wanted to give them a tip of their hat. There's little touches of that here and there, but again, a band I hear mentioned all the time with like, you know, this is early brutal death metal stuff, but there's nothing really slammy or breakdowny or super Suffocation influenced on this to me. Maybe I've just been paying attention to the wrong outlets for whatever music is, but you know, again, these were like really important holes to fill for me, bands that I knew were important to the history of death metal and very good. And I think you might see more people digging into this stuff, you know, as time goes on. If you listen to bands like, I think a big example is Vomit Forth from Connecticut, who are fucking awesome and seem to draw a lot of inspiration from like, you know, early Internal Bleeding, and they've name-checked Scattered Remnants as an influence and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, I don't want it to be derivative, but I welcome kind of new influences in pushing death metal forward myself. So yeah, that's it. That's my rambling diatribe and all this shit that I just spent a bunch of money on in the past couple of months. Have a good one. Bye.